Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to be starting up here in the top left-hand corner of the map on top of the blue Protoss player. Representing Team Ting, give it up for Neeb, the American god himself. And spawned down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. I made a comparison of him at one point, being sort of like an early stage Neeb. We'll see if he can live up to the name. Give it up for Skystone Gaming's PiLiPiLi. A guy who is still, again, coming up into that literal NA god level. He's not there yet, but he is definitely getting closer and closer to being there. We'll see, again, if he can make it work. PvP is definitely one of those matchups that a lot of nice little trickery, a lot of really good reading of subtle cues can help out quite a bit. I also got word, I think, from someone in the chat mentioned that it was Masa who took the series versus Semper 2-1. So the winner of this series is going to go on to face off versus Masa in the losers bracket. Possibly tomorrow. I'm not sure if this is being played today or tomorrow. We'll find out, I suppose, at some point. Actually, I'm pretty sure I got told this, but I have already forgotten. But yes, we will be seeing that, but at least either today or tomorrow, one of the two. And I think the winner of that series versus Masa ends up having to play off versus the loser of Scarlet versus Puck in a qualifying match. So both of these two players, Neeb and PiLiPiLi, have got a long road of pretty solid players to make it through. I mean, let's say PiLiPiLi, who is very much the underdog coming into this particular series, wins versus Neeb, overcomes all odds. He then has to take on probably, arguably, the best Terran player in North America right now, Masa. And let's say, just theoretically, if Puck ends up losing to Scarlet in the winner's bracket, then PiLiPiLi would have to then play versus Scarlet. So he'd have to play versus arguably the best Protoss player in North America, arguably the best Terran player in North America, and then arguably the best Zerg player in North America. You just can't cut a break. Can't catch a break. Of course, Neeb would have to do the same thing, except he can't really play versus himself. So he's already played versus Puck, who I think would be second in contention for best player, Protoss player in North America. But either way, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk a bit more about what's going on in this game. We did have just one Stalker being made for Neeb, has the second Stalker on the way, and it's going to be out in time, just barely in time to deal with the Adepts. This is a bit of a corner you can cut. You get out the slightly earlier Mothership core, you get out your Warp Gate technology and everything a little bit faster. You say, oh, I don't really need to rush out these units. I'm going to be playing defensive with them. And PiLiPiLi is definitely one of those players that I think favors. He does occasionally go for the Stalkers, but he favors going for the Adepts over the Stalkers. So this might have been an identification from me playing him on the ladder, playing him recently at DreamHack Montreal and doing maybe some preparation for that. But looks like PiLiPiLi not going to be able to accomplish a whole lot with these Adepts. The important thing, though, is that he keeps them alive for at least a little bit longer, makes his way into the main base, kills off 3 workers for 2 Adepts. Not the worst thing in the world. Most importantly, again, gets the scout off on the robotics facility. So he knows what he's up against. He knows that this Oracle that's coming out could potentially do a little bit of damage, and even forces out some foot-and overcharges, which is also very nice. Looks like the Adepts do shape their way past the Stalkers, only to encounter another set of Stalkers. Oracle gonna make its way into the main base and kills off, ooh, might be able to kill off 1 or 2 workers over here. Ooh, finds a nice little angle. The Mothership Core doesn't have enough energy to foot-and overcharge again. This is really, really nice over here for PiLiPiLi. Getting up 6 kills on that Oracle. That's definitely a value Oracle. Now, granted, he did lose all of his Adepts. 11 workers killed for PiLiPiLi is a pretty big deal in this matchup. In a mirror matchup, being up 5 workers is really solid. Looks like there was a bit of a pause from Neeb. Gotta make sure I'm not lagging or anything. Yeah, I got 67 ping. Oh, is Neeb playing from Korea right now? I just realized Neeb is probably playing from Korea right now. He's probably back from DreamHack Montreal, probably suffering from a little bit of jet lag from traveling all the way from Canada back to Korea. Oh man, that's rough. What a guy. Well, as soon as he's resolved that, we'll be able to jump back into the game. But I do want to, say, Neeb, yes, he's gotten up the faster robotics facility, which is definitely nice for him. Already getting up that observer. He's going to be able to keep an eye on PiLiPiLi for a good bit of time, where PiLiPiLi is really not going to be able to take out that observer for a while. But I guess he does have his own Twilight Council coming up, so he may just be following this up into a Resonating Glaives. Really quick adept play, so he can get out a lot of adepts. Adepts have definitely taken over the matchup right now. And I think knowing that you've killed off as many workers as you have, PiLiPiLi is probably thinking that he can probably end the game just off the economic lead he's gotten off of before we end up seeing disruptors coming out, because disruptors really are the big point where suddenly you want blink stalkers as opposed to adepts. Before that though, you're really fine with just getting lots and lots of adepts. Ooh, double oracles taking out both of the sentries. Gonna lose one of the oracles, unfortunately. I think that was a little bit of a missed micro from PiLiPiLi as he tried to back up a bit too early. Maybe he was trying to do a little bit of cute micro over there, but I do feel like he lost on a little bit of DPS and did end up losing the extra oracle, potentially because of it. Resonating Glaives is going to be coming out though behind this. Third expansion also coming out for PiLiPiLi. Probably going to be seeing the same thing from Neeb relatively shortly. He's getting up his own Twilight Council, probably to get up his own Resonating Glaives upgrade. Immortal Adept is just considered probably the strongest composition you can go for right now in a PvP. We'll see if Neeb can bounce back from the economic deficit, because it's not a massive one, but it is big enough to be noteworthy. 5 workers will be mining quite a bit more minerals than your opponents, and that does allow you to just even throw up a couple extra gateways. I think the way the numbers work out is, I believe it's each worker mines about 40 to 50 minerals a minute. So you can imagine 5 workers, that's a solid 250 minerals a minute that you're missing out on that your opponent has. That's an extra gateway and another zealot. That's maybe 2 extra adepts. That's a lot of really useful things. A faster expansion, as we ended up seeing PiLiPiLi able to go for that faster expansion. Now, of course, it did come at the cost of getting his tech up a little bit slower. Still has not, or only recently just got up that robotics facility. So his observer is going to be a lot later. You can see Neeb already has 2 of them out and is already thinking about producing some of those immortals. But honestly, he's been pretty idle with that robotics facility, so that is a bit of a surprise to me. I wonder if that's, again, just a symptom of his money not really playing out quite as well, since he did lose some of those earlier workers. Or if he's really just looking to not really make use of that robotics facility that much. If he's looking to go into this blink play and get out a lot of these stalkers, which are going to be up against Resonating Glaive Adepts. And like I was saying before, Immortal Adept has shown in Korea to be a really, really strong composition. And in massive numbers, Resonating Glaive Adepts fare quite well versus blink stalkers. The blink stalkers really have to have a lot of room to continuously attack and blink backwards and move away from your opponent's army. Engage and disengage, I think, is the critical thing you need to make sure you're able to do with those stalkers. Otherwise, the adepts just shade on top of all your stalkers, and suddenly you're in a world of trouble. You're taking a massive amount of damage, because the stalkers, while they can deal some decent damage versus armor units, they're not dealing that extra damage, that extra 4 damage versus adepts, because they're light units. And the adepts still get their Resonating Glaives upgrade. They still get that faster attack speed. So you really have to abuse blink. Oracle, it looks like has been able to get up a couple more kills, but does finally get taken out. Unfortunate for PiLiPiLi, since he would have loved to have been able to continue to use it for just getting revelations off. Keep an eye on his opponent, especially when your opponent is going for all these blink stalkers. King Sejong Station, it's not super often, but you do sometimes see players get really, really cheeky, sending all their stalkers all the way down over here and then blinking them up into the main base, doing some harassment forces like that. It has been known to happen every so often, so it's nice to be able to keep an eye on your opponent with revelations. PiLiPiLi, though, getting out that Warp Prism. He's looking to make his big push out. He knows that he wants to try and make a big push before his opponent gets up to those Disruptors, because that's going to be the big time where it gets a lot more dicey. Adepts are going to be shading on through. He's going to let it finish. He's going to be able to pick off 1 or 2 Stalkers over here. And you can see that these Adepts, they don't do massive amounts of damage to the Stalkers, but they still get the damage done, and they don't really take a lot of losses themselves. Worker counts have mostly evened up. In fact, Neeb is starting to crawl a little bit further ahead, sitting up at 60 workers at 57, but it's mostly because PiLiPiLi has halted worker production. He is looking to end this right here, right now. He's got a lot of adepts in the mix, and it doesn't look like he's going to let that shade finish. He wants to move, maybe moving over here to the 3rd expansion. He doesn't want to have to overcommit, but he's going to find that those pylons are going to be causing some problems for him. He does end up sending his Immortals all the way to the front. One of the Immortals is going to get picked off very, very soon, and Oh my god, he's actually not losing that immortal. Finally ends up going down. The Adepts are going to try and shade on forward. I don't know if this has been the best engagement over here from PiLiPiLi. All the immortals and the stalkers staying alive. He's fighting inside the Photon overcharge, and I think that Neeb should be able to hold over here. PiLiPiLi wasn't really able to use the War Prism to get that nice kind of immortal micro either, and versus the stalker heavy composition, that immortal micro with the War Prism was so important. The War Prism is also going to go down, and it looks like Neeb manages to hold, takes a massive supply lead. PiLiPiLi, not with the best engagement, engages into a very well defended position, and people always say this about Neeb. Neeb is an amazing defender. That is what he is best at, and he once again shows it. He puts up a really, really solid defense. PiLiPiLi is just going to try and kill off as many workers as possible, tries to focus fire a couple of them down, but really only ends up evening up the working count, 57 to 57-ish. Looks like 56 out now for Neeb. But quickly remakes a couple of those and is going to be able to get back up to 60. PiLiPiLi, though, loses his entire army, is sitting now down 40 supply. That's almost undoable. Unless you had disruptors or something coming out behind this, it is nigh impossible to try and make that kind of comeback in army supply. It just isn't one of those matchups where, unless you have some sort of form of splash damage like a disruptor, you can't really get a massive, you know, army concave on your opponent or lead up in these upgrades or anything. It's not really, doesn't really work that way because Adepts shade on top of each other. Yeah, you know what? Concaves be damned. I'm on top of your army and I feel like I have more units than you. Therefore, all of my units are attacking and so are all of yours. It doesn't really matter. That's awful. Honestly, the way that most Protoss players tend to fight with Adepts versus Adepts these days. Alright, Photon overcharges are gonna go off. I just really don't think that PiLiPiLi has enough, but he's gonna look to try and prove me wrong. As he tries to move in over here, force fields are gonna be keeping out a lot of the units over here for PiLiPiLi. He's doing a pretty nice job of holding on so far, but the Stalker's just adding a little bit of extra damage. PiLiPiLi's Archon is in the backside, and he's starting to bleed out so many of these Adepts. Neeb is going to have another reinforcing warp end of Adepts pretty soon as well. The Photon overcharges, I've got to say, for both of these players have been ridiculously good. And PiLiPiLi is starting to make some headway over here. He's got 3 Immortals. He doesn't have a Warp Prism to micro them with like Neeb does. And with the Adepts shaded on forward, it looks like those Immortal Hardened Shields are going to be popped. There go down the Immortals, and there goes down PiLiPiLi. Neeb takes game number 1 with a very solid defense over at his 3rd expansion. And I really do feel like that is a bit unfortunate for PiLiPiLi because PiLiPiLi, again, he's been considered to be the underdog in this series by a fairly wide margin. Not because he's a bad player. In fact, I think he's one of the better North American players right now. But unfortunately, that attack of the 3rd really did it. I'm costing him. It was a really, really, I think, if you're a PiLiPiLi fan, and I'm a PiLiPiLi fan, I'm also a Neeb fan, but as a PiLiPiLi fan also, that was a bit frustrating for me to watch because I feel like he did give away a bit of a lead. He had the higher army supply and engaged into something that I don't necessarily know he had to. I think that if he had maybe just tried to continue to poke and prod, maybe he was a little bit concerned that disruptors would be coming out soon. He saw how many stalkers there were and he thought, oh man, you know, stalkers, if you're my opponent's smart, they're going to try and go into disruptors a little bit quicker. He got up a faster robotics facility. A lot of things just sort of lead toward that style play. Neeb also had the +1 weapons upgrade, by the way, throughout a large portion of that game, which does play a bit of an impact in PvP. +2 weapons, a little bit more of an important upgrade than +1. But still, I think Neeb was maybe leading and hinting toward all these things that PiLiPiLi was thinking, if I take this to the later and later stages of the game, it's going to get harder and harder. So I need to end this now and maybe jump the gun a little bit. We'll see if he is able to maybe secure himself another one of those leads again as we hop into game number 2 on New Gettysburg. All right. So here we are in the bottom left-hand corner of the map, top of the red Protoss player, representing Team Ting, currently up 1-0 in this best of 3. Give it up for Neeb. And his opponent spun down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. We got the blue Protoss player from Storm Gaming. Is definitely an underdog in this series, but has not given up just yet. Give it up for PiLiPiLi. And you know, again, I keep bringing up that last that defense at the third for Neeb, PiLiPiLi maybe overcommitting a little bit. But I think the important takeaway what I want to have over here is that PiLiPiLi is not so ridiculously outclassed and outmatched that he is incapable of taking games off of Neeb. Despite the fact that he may not have taken a competitive series off of Neeb in the past 6 months, I know that he's taking ladder games off of him every so often when Neeb was more active on the ladder, before he moved to Korea basically. And I know that he's capable of it. He showed in that last game he's capable of getting a lead. It's just a matter of keeping it and closing out the game, finishing off Neeb. And while that is arguably probably one of the harder things to do, it's one of those easier said than done sort of situations. Just because, again, Neeb is really good at defending. I think that we still have a good series on our hands. It's not one of those, okay, one-sided stomps. Let's bet all of our Partoufs on Neeb, and, you know, it's a guaranteed surefire win. But, again, in that last game, PiLiPiLi was really able to get the lead off of the Oracle play. And it was a combination of the Oracle plus the Adepts harassing, exploiting Neeb, who preemptively, I won't say preemptively, I think that's not really doing justice to it. Neeb did very early on, though, use up a photon overcharge on one of his pylons to deal with the Adept harassment. Because of that, he threw down another photon overcharge when the Oracle came in at an angle that did not cover his entire mineral line. And when that happened, the Oracle was able to get another 6 kills. That was really what put PiLiPiLi much further in the lead. That was what allowed him to get the better economy to try and eventually overpower Neeb and get up that higher army supply, get up the faster Adepts play and everything. So, looks like PiLiPiLi gonna lead it up with a Stargate once again. Maybe he's gonna try and take advantage of Neeb saying, hey, I don't really like your pylon placement. I think that it could use some work, so I'm going to try and abuse it to the best of my abilities. Problem with Neeb is that he's one of those players that learns very, very quickly. So it's very difficult to punish Neeb the same way multiple times. And Neeb is already going to be getting out those double stalkers fairly quickly. He's going to be getting them out before the Adepts actually make their way out for PiLiPiLi. In fact, PiLiPiLi is not going for any Adepts. He's going straight up into Phoenix. He's not going for the Oracle either. And this is a really interesting play. Phoenix Adept can be a strong composition, but PiLiPiLi is not even going for any gateway units whatsoever right now. He's really cutting corners. He's trying to cut as many corners as possible. And this might be a good identification. I talked about in that last game, Neeb going for the slightly delayed stalkers, because he identified PiLiPiLi is one of those players that really likes to open up with Adepts. I don't have to get out my stalkers immediately. I can get them out eventually, and they'll eventually be able to defend. And PiLiPiLi almost likewise saying, I know that Neeb really likes to get out those 2 stalkers, so I don't need to get up any units. Neeb's going to be sitting back at home defending with his stalkers. He's not going to be moving across the map right now. So I can just get out my Phoenix completely safe and sound. I know that Neeb is also going to go for these robo plays, because Neeb is a creature, I won't say of habit, he's known to mix things up for certain. But if he feels like he can just win a game through a macro game, he is very much up for just playing out a macro game. Continued Phoenix production coming out with the robotics facility now popping out. PiLiPiLi is for the first time making a couple of gateway units as he warps in his first 2 Adepts to take care of an opposing Adept that's made its way in. Looks like this Adept for Neeb will get a very, very juicy scout off on some of what PiLiPiLi has. I think that he saw the robotics facility. I'm not sure if he saw the Phoenix, although he does end up seeing them now. Phoenix are going to be able to come in over here. They built up some energy as well, so they are able to kill off a couple of these workers. Got to be careful with the control. Don't want to end up losing in these Phoenix unnecessarily. But this is supposed to be a very annoying thing over here. It's not, losing a Phoenix is really unideal in this situation. But this really will force out quite a few stalkers for Neeb, which is, again, forcing your opponent into stalkers. The Adepts do end up trading a lot better when it comes to the actual engagement. If you have a lot of Adepts or equal amount of mineral/gas investment into the Adepts versus stalkers, the Adepts trade better. Oh, losing another one of those Phoenix stuff. This is really not going super amazingly for PiLiPiLi. He's getting some damage done. He's forcing out a lot of photon overcharges, which does open up opportunities for attack later on. But losing so many of these Phoenixes is a big problem, because he really wanted this to snowball. He wanted this to be 5 Phoenix right now, with the 6th one coming out across the map, And 6 Phoenix are enough that you can take on 3 Stalkers that are sitting by themselves. You can lift a couple of them up. You can take out a Mothership Core very quickly. And suddenly there's no more Fortune overcharges. You can pick up some of the guys in gas and just ignore some of those Stalkers. There's a lot more potential. But because he's really just been losing in more and more of these Phoenix as time goes on, he doesn't have that sort of snowballing potential. But he's still been making a lot of these Immortals behind this, or is at least starting up on that now. I guess he had to get out one of those early observers, making sure he doesn't die to some kind of DT play or something, since he did see a lot of Stalkers. He knows there's a Twilight Council out. Gotta be careful. Guardian Shield's coming out. Guardian Shield does defend air units, by the way, since I think some people, I've heard some people not be totally certain about that. But yeah, there's the Resonating Glaze upgrade coming out from PiLiPiLi as he continues to get out Immortals and Adepts, and just hoping to force out as many Stalkers as possible. Phoenix count is starting to get to that nice point, but man, I've got to say, as much as I want to criticize PiLiPiLi for losing a lot of these Phoenix throughout this game, Neeb has been doing a really nice job making sure he's just focus firing those Phoenix down, making sure that it's not just arbitrary fire on any kind of Phoenix whatsoever. It's always targeted fire, always trying to kill off one Phoenix at a time, not spreading out that damage. And that's part of the reason why he's maybe catching PiLiPiLi off guard, where PiLiPiLi plays versus a lot of other pros players, says, hey, normally I'm not losing this many Phoenix. What's going on right now? But versus Neeb, you can't really rely on anything like that. Double Foot and Overcharge gets popped. Mothership Core does go down, but so does one Phoenix. Second Phoenix gets focus fired down. Neeb almost gets another one, and oh, PiLiPiLi. Blink is going to be off cooldown. He kills off the other Phoenix, and there's only one Phoenix left. There's not even any more Phoenix even being made right now. And yeah, PiLiPiLi did some nice damage with it. He's killed off 13 workers, but he lost a lot of Phoenix over there. That was a big investment, and those Phoenix are supposed to be important. In the upcoming engagement, they were going to be there to lift up the Immortals, to try and take Stalkers out of the fight. Lift up the Sentries, maybe even take out the Guardian Shields. They were really supposed to be there to add a huge impact to this fight, but since they aren't, PiLiPiLi is going to be relying on pure numbers. Getting out an Archon, pushing it forward with the Adepts, trying to get involved into the engagement as soon as possible. Gets the Warp Prism out. He's got to be on top of that Warp Prism micro. Last game, he tried to do a lot of the Warp-ins, and his Warp Prism was in Warp-in mode, but it was too far back. There is a bit of a fear since there are Blink Stalkers over here, but I think the best thing you can do is try and get that big Warp-in and then take it out of the Warp-in mode. Use it for that micro. Try and force an engagement as soon as possible. Shade's going to be not finishing over here for PiLiPiLi. He doesn't decide to go fully on in. One Phoenix is out and slowly taking out that Mothership Core. Mothership Core doesn't have any energy for Photon Overcharge, but it doesn't look like it's going to matter. Here we go. PiLiPiLi shading on forward. Or the Warp Prism is way further back, so there's not going to be any additional micro. And PiLiPiLi is just getting outnumbered, outgunned, out-concaved. And this doesn't look like it's going so well. PiLiPiLi still has all of his Immortals alive, though, so they can still be a big tide turner in this engagement. He's warping in more of the Adepts, and the Immortals finally starting to make some connections as Neeb starts to run out of those Adepts on the front line. If PiLiPiLi can get these Immortals on top of his opponent's Stalkers, on top of his opponent's Immortal, he is suddenly going to be making a lot more progress than he was before. He's got some nice focus fire in there, starting to target fire down one of those Immortals. This pushing is not done just yet. In fact, leaving even a couple of Adepts that can try and move over to the third expansion could be an effective tactic over here. He tries to move in, not that many Stalkers, so he can't really blink forward on top of the Warp Prism, snipe it off like he could earlier. PiLiPiLi is going to be a bit safer with that, keeping the Archon alive as well. He can use that to try and soak up some shots at the front line, but Neeb has his own Archons as well now. And that's going to make it a lot harder for these Adepts for Neeb, or for PiLiPiLi to soak up as many hits, because these Archons are going to be focus firing and doing a ton of damage whenever they turn to fire. They're doing extra damage versus those light units. PiLiPiLi is bleeding out a lot of these Adepts, but it is really a close engagement. The big difference right now is starting to become that +2 weapons upgrade. Despite the fact that PiLiPiLi has this great army, he's got a lot of gateways, he's just having so much trouble breaking through the +2 weapons. Archon's finally getting taken out. PiLiPiLi goes for a massive Adept Warp-in. Warp Prism gets sniped off, but not before the final Warp-in for PiLiPiLi comes in, and it looks like he's starting to clean things up. PiLiPiLi takes a game off of Neeb, the first one that he's taken in the last 6 months, as I mess up the overlays a little bit. Big congratulations to PiLiPiLi. Now, he has obviously only tied up the series. We got another game on our hands, ladies and gentlemen, but he has done the first step that is unbelievably necessary and unavoidable in beating Neeb. You have to take a game off of Neeb before you can take a best 2 games off of Neeb. That is a must. There's no way to get around that or avoid that. There's no shortcuts in this. So big congratulations. Again, I want to show this to anyone who maybe wasn't here earlier when we're taking a look at their match history and everything, but seriously, the last time PiLiPiLi has taken a game off of Neeb was back in February of this year, and it was in a best of 1 for the SC2 Improved Team League. It was in the Team League of On Fire versus Sidestorm Gaming. But okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're hopping into game number 3. It's going to be the decider match. Who moves on to face off versus Masa? Who gets knocked out and is not going to be qualifying through this qualifier? We'll find out. We'll see you guys on Frozen Temple. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, game number 3. We are going to be starting up here in the top left-hand corner of the map, on top of the blue Protoss player from Team Ting. Give it up for Neeb. And his opponent spawned down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the map, the Frozen Temple. Give it up for Sidestorm Gaming's PiLiPiLi is finally taking his first game off of Neeb. I guess possibly even just because we don't have it on our statistics screen, but it might have been the second game he's taken off of Neeb this year in a competitive series. We'll see if he can do it one more time. That's all he has to do. If he can take out Neeb this one more time, one game is all he needs. And Neeb is out. Neeb is out of the qualifier, as far as I'm aware. I'm going to keep adding as far as I'm aware, because for anyone who's not aware, I was not supposed to be casting this. Rifkin and Zombie Grub were casting this earlier on, but they have a ridiculous amount of casting that they did today, and they have a ridiculous amount of casting that they have to do tomorrow. And this has been a very long running qualifier. This has been running way over time. So Rifkin and Zombie Grub were like, hey, look, we need to go to bed because we need to cast these qualifiers tomorrow. So I said, hey, I'm free right now. All I'm doing is eating Cookie Crisp and drinking Stella Artois, or also known as Stella Artosis. I'm happy to cast it, so that's part of the reason why I'm jumping in. So do forgive me if I'm not 100% familiar with all of the details of this. This is sort of an impromptu thing for me. But all right, we got the Adepts being made over here for Neeb this time. Neeb is the one going for the Adepts, and PiLiPiLi is going for the Soccer. So a bit of a role reversal from what I usually see from both of these players. But PiLiPiLi did go for the Mothership Core, moving around, maybe looking for, I guess, a proxy location, potentially. Stalkers are going to encounter the Adepts over in the center of the map. This is something that PiLiPiLi does a lot more often than Neeb. That Neeb seems like is a bit more hesitant to do, moving out much further onto the map with his Stalkers. And the reason why you do this is you try and just encounter those Adepts, you catch them, you force them to use their shade earlier on so that you can catch them with your 3rd and 4th Stalkers as they come out. As PiLiPiLi has already made those. It's probably going to be wanting to make those sentries now. Yeah, there's the first sentry coming out. Want to get up that energy so you can start hallucinating Phoenix, scouting out your opponents. Now, both these players this game are going to be going for the robotics facility tech first. So no big differences in tech this game for the first time. It is going to be a straight up fight. Adepts, again, focus fire down by Photon Overcharge. 2 workers have gone down. 2 workers go down. And Neeb, I believe, keeps that other Adept. No, he loses the Adept. Oh, surprising. I thought the Adept still had a bit of health left, but Photon Overcharge, what can you say, man? It's pretty good. So both these players are going to grab their natural expansion, start up on the robotic facility units, getting out an Immortal really quickly over here for Neeb. PiLiPiLi probably going to do similar things. Some players like to go for the faster Observer. I myself am a little bit more in favor of the faster Observer. I like to get and not necessarily keep an eye on your opponent, but just be a little bit safer against DTs and prepared for a lot more things. But I can definitely understand both these players going for the Immortals right now. Probably understand that the timing's a little bit better than a diamond level Protoss player like Fear Dragon. Yeah. But this is something we've definitely consistently been able to identify throughout this series so far. Neeb has been going for these weapon upgrades PiLiPiLi has just been completely skipping them. In fact, I'm starting to wonder at this point with how much those weapon upgrades have been doing for Neeb in that last game. Honestly, those weapon upgrades are what made that game look a lot closer than it should have been, because PiLiPiLi straight up should have had a much larger army. But the problem was he was up against +2 weapon upgrades, and he had no upgrades himself. So we'll see if he actually ever, I don't even know if he's really aware of this, or if he's identified this. I assume he's been clicking on his opponent's units every so often, checking out what their upgrades are at. It's a pretty common thing for a pro player, but you never know when players aren't necessarily keeping on top of some of that small stuff. First Photon Overcharge is forced out very early on over here for Neeb, but looks like there's a lot of Photon Overcharge energy available. PiLiPiLi is going to have a hard time busting in over here. Although these pylons can sometimes work against you, with some good force fields, you can keep out a lot of this army just because they act as additional force fields. 1 or 2 force fields over here, and suddenly PiLiPiLi could probably start taking out these pylons over here for Neeb. The thing he has to be careful of is that he doesn't get force fielded in himself. Looks like he's going to be able to catch the Warp Prism. Wow, he gets the Warp Prism. That's a really big deal. You might be thinking, well, it doesn't matter. Neeb's back at home defending, but it's not necessarily about the warping potential. It's about the pickup potential. Keeping those Immortals, those Adepts, those Stalkers that are getting damaged on the front lines alive. Another Photon Overcharge is being used. There's only going to be one more left and pretty soon, and the Pylon just got taken out, so suddenly Neeb doesn't have as much time as maybe he wanted earlier on. Another Photon Overcharge goes out, but both of the Pylons get picked off. PiLiPiLi is doing a nice job keeping his units alive, but he only has 1 Immortal, and it doesn't look like he's going to be able to pressure on any further. He's got a Proxy Gateway available over here, and this is actually a really nice, small little move. And the reason why, you might be thinking, well, he has a Warp Prism. Is it just for the safety precaution? It's also for the fact that now he can leave that Warp Prism in not warping mode. He can allow it to just continuously be like in this mode, where it's moving around, picking up units, and he doesn't have to worry about it just losing it because it gets too far on the front line, because he can always move it back. He's got the safety gateway they can warp in at. It is a little bit further away, but it really is a much safer play to go for. PiLiPiLi has a very closely supplied army, but he's still lagging behind in that worker count, as well as, most importantly, the gas geysers. 3rd and 4th gas geysers have been missing for PiLiPiLi for such a long period of time. He's looking for opportunity to maybe drop some units over in the main base, try and force out, even just forcing out warp-ins in the main base is really nice, because look, he forces out 3 Adepts in the main base for Neeb, while he moves back into the natural expansion with all of his Adepts. So it should be an army lead over here for PiLiPiLi, but he's getting flanked from both sides, the high ground and the low ground. Immortals over here for PiLiPiLi, getting kept alive. Really important that he does that. He's gonna have to be very, very careful though. He's starting to fall a bit further behind in army supply, as well as those weapon upgrades really starting to add in quite a bit. It's those Adept versus Adepts. Adepts do extra damage versus light units, and they are light units, so they do extra damage versus each other. It's 24 damage versus the 22 damage. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it does add up, even versus the Immortals. That seems like Neeb is going to be able to hold on over here. A Warp Prism gets taken out, the Immortals get taken out, and it seems like that is going to be the majority of the hopes. PiLiPiLi says good GG, good luck, and Neeb advances on to face off versus Masa in the next round of the qualifiers for the Copa North American qualifier.